Good morning, friends. Welcome to Beastie Boys and Babylon Noise, my exploration of the Revelation to John in little 10-minute or so increments. I'm J.R. Forsteros, and hopefully you're here because you've been following along, or maybe you were just curious because we're to the infamous four horsemen of the apocalypse that are in Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 through 8. So remember, we're in the second vision cycle, and we met the Lamb who is always slaughtered, who is holding the scroll that has been sealed. It's the scroll that is announcing God's will for the earth, and no one was worthy to open it until they saw the lamb who was slaughtered. And this lamb who was slaughtered, because this lamb was slaughtered, was worthy to open the scroll. And so I promised a couple weeks ago that we were going to now see the lamb start popping open the seals, and every time a seal is opened in heaven, we see something happen on the earth, and that's a pattern that'll be consistent through the rest of the book. So sure enough, if you've already read Revelation 6 1 through 8, you'll see that it says the lamb opened the first seal, which, remember, these are like wax seals that a monarch would use their signet to make a seal there, right? So there's like breaking open the seals. And then in each of these first of the four seals, a horseman rides out. And so you're going to see this because there's three different cycles of things in Revelation. There's there's seven seals, there's seven trumpets, and then there's seven bowls of wrath that are dumped out on the earth. And so when all of them, the first four are connected in some way, and then the other three are kind of a potpourri of insanity. So in this one, we have four horsemen who ride out, and believe it or not, they really do hang together in a specific way. So in order to understand what's going on here, you first need to understand Parthia. Now, if you were an ancient Roman, you lived under what was called the Pax Romana, or the Peace of Rome. And this was whether you were a Roman citizen or not. The Peace of Rome was a really brilliant piece of imperial propaganda that was introduced by Caesar Augustus, who is the guy who was Caesar when Jesus was born, and everyone who came after him in Rome was really trying to emulate his imperial policies. He was Julius Caesar's nephew and heir. He's the one that defeated Mark Antony to really solidify Rome as an empire. Even though Caesar was the first emperor, Augustus was really the first one to take it and make it what it became. And so he introduced this thing called the Pax Romana, or the Peace of Rome, and it was sort of like a threat and a promise that if you lived under Rome, you would have peace. And so when they came to conquer other peoples, they say, hey, we came to bring you the peace of Rome. And it was kind of an or else, right? Worship Rome, follow Rome, or else. And so you can see actually in the middle of the map there, you can see Asia Minor, you can see Ephesus, which is one of our seven churches. You can see where the churches are, and you can see how not very far at all to the east of modern day Turkey, the Roman province of Asia, is this large green space that's called the Parthian Empire. The Parthians are the modern day Persians. This is the Iranians. This was their vast empire. And they were, in a real way, throughout Roman history, sort of the boogeymen who were on the edge of the empire. They were the other massive empire that Rome could never quite conquer. And so they were always lurking on the periphery of the Peace of Rome. And they were always sort of giving lie to the idea that Caesar could protect you the way that Caesar promised he could, the way that the propaganda said that he could. They were the boogeymen. In our modern day era, they're somewhat similar to our never-ending war on terror, right? That eventually, if we are violent enough places in the world, we'll feel safe. And actually, the opposite is true, right? We just continue to create more violence and to create more people, create more enemies. It was sort of the same thing in Rome with Parthia. Their struggle between these two empires goes back centuries. Herod the Great was involved in a sort of a guerrilla war, like a shadow war. If you're familiar with the U.S. and Russia going to war in Vietnam, sort of as a proxy, it's very similar to what happened between Rome and Parthia in Palestine in the first century BCE, and it happened over and over again. So why that is important is because this first horseman is described as on a white horse with a bow. Now, white in the ancient world symbolized victory. We've talked about that before, right? And not purity. And most importantly, this bowman is given a crown. Now, again, you probably remember that these crowns in Revelation, there's two different Greek words that get translated crown. One is Stephanos, one is diadem. Stephanos is like a laurel wreath that represents victory. It's what you would get like a gold medal at the Olympics, right? And then the diadem is like a crown that a ruler would wear. It symbolizes power and authority. The horseman here, the first horseman, is given a Stephanos crown, a gold medal crown, and then it says he goes out and has victory in many battles. What's really scary about this guy is that he is a bowman. He is mounted cavalry, and that was the signature feature of the Parthian armies. That is why they were so feared in battle. The Romans had their legions, right? But the Parthians had their mounted cavalry. So this is pretty obviously, pretty clearly a cavalryman who represents the Parthian Empire. And again, a Roman would see this as a warning, as a threat that despite Rome's claims to the contrary, they're never actually as safe as the emperor wants them to think they are due to the emperor, right? The next two horsemen then sort of progress from there. The next horseman is a red horseman who has a sword, and he takes peace from the land, right? So again, this is sort of what we would see in response to some kind of an invasion, right? Is civil unrest. We see when we become anxious about the world outside, we tend to turn on each other. Again, think of how much upheaval there's been in the last number of years as various minority groups have petitioned for more rights, right? We have BLM, we have Pride, we have things like that, and how much unrest that has created because of these people standing up for themselves in a time when there's already so much other anxiety around the world, right? It's like we don't have the emotional bandwidth to deal with the kinds of changes we're facing at home. And so instead of creating peace and tranquility and a sense of community and camaraderie, it creates discord. Then we have a horseman who rides out with a set of scales. This in the ancient world was a symbol of mercantilism or commerce. So today you might think of like maybe he's waving like a stock ticker or something like that, right? Like this is like an economic reality. And again, what we see is grain prices, which were the sort of the basic thing, skyrocketing. The prices that are there are just absurd prices for grains, where other things like oil and wine are not touched. So again, massive economic instability and unpredictability. It's hard not to think about the discourse over the price of eggs that's been going on for the last year or so, right? Where again, when things are unstable, even when war is happening somewhere else in the world, like Gaza or Ukraine or something like that, it affects prices here in the US. And we understand that there's like this interconnectedness that when we choose to engage in violence or support violence elsewhere in the world, it still harms us here. And there's really nothing that the government can do to prevent that, despite their promises to the contrary. And so all of this culminates with this final horseman, right? This one that is death itself, that rides out. And of course, again, what did we expect would happen when we have external warfare, we have internal civil disquiet and strife, and then we have economic instability? Of course, people are going to die, right? By the thousands. And this is something that, despite the empire's promises, it cannot prevent. So that's really what these horsemen represent here, is this they give lie to the Roman propaganda, to the Pax Romana. And Jesus is showing us right out of the gate that as God begins to enact God's will on the world, the false empires are being revealed for just that, false. Empires always overpromise and underdeliver. They always promise us way more than they can actually give us. And beyond that, the peace that they offer is always only for a select few, and it's always the other side of the coin is always violence on those who are considered expendable, right? And so, what Jesus wants to illustrate to these churches, who many of whom are thinking maybe they would do well to trust in Rome's power and worship Caesar, is that trusting in this power is foolish, because they're never able to do what they promise they can, right? It's always a lie. And that goes for Christian nationalists today too. First thing we have to recognize is that the things that we are trading our faithfulness for, security, stability, a sense of belonging, these are all false promises. They all are ultimately lies. Many of you saw the headline this week that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's been one of the leading MAGA people is starting to question whether the GOP actually supports women or not, right? And many people have been making fun of her and laughing and things like that. But this is a realization we all come to at some point, is that the people that we invest in and trust in, when they're serving an imperial agenda, always are going to turn out to be false. And we're always going to be disillusioned and disappointed at some point. A very powerful message right out of the gate. It's Jesus really confronting the Pax Romana head on, and we could say the same of the Pax Americana if we're looking at today. So next week, we're going to continue unsealing. We have 3 more seals to go, and we're going to get into a whole bunch of discourse about justice and suffering. And I think next week we'll probably meet the 144,000. So again, some more very popular, famous imagery from this book. But until then, I just want to say thank you for watching. I'd love to hear what you think of the 4 Horsemen now that you sort of walked through unpacking them with me. And of course, I want to say thank you for watching and subscribing, particularly those of you who are subscribing and supporting financially. This is free for everyone, but it's very, very, very helpful for me to be able to keep doing these things when you support that way as well. So be well, be aware, and until next week, grace and peace be with you.